Hello everyone and welcome to Sipz and Stories. My name is Elizabeth and in today's video I will be doing the classics book tag. I absolutely love this tag. So many of my favorite booktubers have done this tag, and in fact I did find it from books like Whoa. I thought she did such an excellent version of this tag, so I will link her video below along with all of the questions in case you would like to do it as well. So grab your favorite beverage as we discuss these amazing classic books. Question prompt number 1 is an overhyped classic that you really did not like, and for me there is only really one answer to this question, and that is Wuthering by Emily Bronte. Whew, oh my goodness, I just have such a love-hate relationship with this book. It is by far one of the books that I was looking forward to reading the most throughout my young adult life, and then when I finally read it a couple years ago, I was just so disappointed in this book. I remember finishing it and being like, what the heck was that? Because it is just not what you think it's going to be, and that's really the real reason I don't like it, is because there is a huge conspiracy theory about this book that it is just like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre, one of those other romantic classics, and that could not be farther from the truth. This book is one of the least romantic books I have ever read. It is about lust and obsession and revenge and greed. So it is highly entertaining, and I understand why people like it, but it is not about a beautiful romance like I thought it was going to be about. In fact, Heathcliff and Cathy, the two main characters, are probably my least favorite couple in all of classic literature. I hate the two of them. They are evil people, and this book is about what happens to them when they do all these evil deeds. And that being said, it is very entertaining. I did give this book 4 out of 5 stars because Emily is a Bronte after all. Her writing is phenomenal, so I am not critiquing the writing in this book at all. It's fantastic. I am, however, critiquing the characters and the plot because, it is just not what you think it's going to be. So if anyone is interested in this book, still read it, but it is not romantic at all. Heathcliff is evil. I'm just gonna put that out there. Question number 2 is, what is your favorite time period to read about? And for me, that would definitely be the early 20th century, so anywhere from the 1900s to the 1950s. I certainly love classic literature from antiquity, the Greek myths. I love the Regency era, Jane Austen, and I love the Victorians, the Brontes, but my favorite niche is definitely from 1900 to 1950. I just think there are so many great books during that time period, and my favorite authors all wrote during that time period, so everyone from Ella Montgomery to P.G. Wodehouse. I also think it is a real renaissance for female authors and women's literature. I think as women were transitioning from the home into the workplace and going to school, obviously they were writing some amazing books at this time, and thanks to publishers like Persephone and Virago, a lot of those books are now back in print, and many of them are on my TBR. In fact, one of my favorite authors from this time period, Virginia Woolf, I think she puts it best. She says that you can definitely tell the difference between books that are pre-World War I to post-World War I. So before World War I, there is still this idealism, there's a gentleness, a calmness to the literature at that time, something like Anne of Green Gables, still very Victorian in nature. And then after World War I, that's when things start really getting good, in my opinion, is obviously people are becoming more disillusioned, obviously more cynical, more snarky. So the comedic writing at that time was fantastic. People like Wodehouse and Evelyn Waugh. So yes, I absolutely adore early 20th century literature. It's by far my favorite. Question number 3 is, what is your favorite fairy tale? I know a lot of people for this question are going to say Beauty and the Beast. I like Beauty and the Beast like many booktubers. Obviously, the love story involves a huge library. Who doesn't love a heroine that likes to read? However, I would say that my favorite fairy tale is old school, is Cinderella. I'm just gonna go with Cinderella because I really do feel Cinderella is the best fairy tale and the most universal. Cinderella is thousands and thousands of years old. It predates Christianity. There are Cinderella myths that go back back to Egypt, to Babylon, to Greek mythology. So I love that about Cinderella because I think it's such a universal archetype. I also love that every culture seems to have a Cinderella story or some version of the Cinderella story. And that is great because I think it speaks to the basic human experience, just turning from an everyday person into a hero or the best version of yourself. I think that's what we're all here to do, is kind of have that transformation like Cinderella had. I also think it's a great archetype as well. I remember some of my college professors saying that, you know, Harry Potter could be considered a Cinderella story, or Pretty Woman could be considered a Cinderella story. And just the thousands and thousands of books that are based on Cinderella, a lot of them in the YA genre that have come out recently. It's just a wonderful story, one that I think will continue to transition into the future. And I'm really excited to see what people do with that Cinderella story in the years to come. Question number 4 is a classic you are most embarrassed you have not read yet. Prior to this year, I probably would have said Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, but I did polish that one off this year. I talked about it in several videos. So now the one I am most embarrassed I have not read is Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. I have a really nice edition, as you can see, of this one. A lot of my favorite booktubers have read and discussed Les Misérables. Some of them have done buddy reads about it. I do not know why I'm not interested in this book, but I just am not. It's not one I am planning to read in the near future. It's one I'd like to get to. That's why I have a nice edition of it, but you know why I'm not that interested in it right now is because Broadway is not open yet. And when I think of Les Misérables, I think of the Broadway show first. That's what comes to mind before the book itself. So because I still have not seen that musical and I'm a fan of Broadway musicals, I just need to really get tickets to either the show in New York or London. And once I have those tickets, I promise I will probably go back and read the book. But until then, I'm just not interested in it yet. So it's not one I'm going to be reading anytime soon. But I am still looking forward to it. Question number 5 is top 5 classics you would like to read soon. The first one is Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I have not read any Anne Bronte yet, either Agnes Grey or Tenant of Wildfell Hall. And as someone that loves Charlotte Bronte but doesn't really like Emily Bronte, as I've said earlier, I'm very curious about Anne Bronte. I'm curious how she fits between her two genius sisters. I suspect that she is going to be very subtle, but yet really good. So I am hoping that I do like her just a little bit more than Emily, but I am not expecting to like her as much as Charlotte, of course. So Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I believe, is about a woman who leaves her husband. So it's one of the very first feminist books in literature. I think it talks a little bit about their brother Bramwell. I think Anne really got the brunt of that relationship with Bramwell. He was very mean and abusive to his sisters. So I think that was the inspiration for this book. I'm not sure, but I'm very excited to read it because so many of my favorite booktubers have loved this book. Another one that I have mentioned previously that I still have not gotten around to yet is Framley Parsonage by Anthony Trollope. I absolutely love Anthony Trollope. I have slowly been making my way through the Barsetshire Chronicles by Anthony Trollope. They are fantastic, so good, so much better than I was expecting that series to be. And so now I'm very savoring them. I'm trying to read one of them per year, and Framley Parsonage is the next one that I need to get to. So if you are unfamiliar with Anthony Trollope, I highly encourage you to pick up some of his books. I really think he is like a cross between Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. So he has the coziness and the sophistication of Austen, but then he has some of these like really kooky characters and the social satire of Dickens. So fantastic writer, and I just cannot wait to get to this one. I've heard that Framley Parsonage is one of the best in the series, so really looking forward to it. Another classic I would like to get to soon is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I was inspired to pick this one up because of that excellent documentary that just came out this year by Ken Burns about Ernest Hemingway. I highly recommend it if you have not seen that documentary. And I love Hemingway, and this is one of the very few Hemingways I still have not read. It's arguably his best book. It's about the Spanish Civil War, I believe, about an American soldier that has to blow up this bridge. And then he falls in love with a Spanish woman named Maria who is escaping Franco. And I'm really excited to read this book. I think what has happened is I've been saving this book. So I bought this copy at Powell's years ago, and it's just been sitting on my shelf for at least 5 years, and I've just been saving it, waiting for the perfect moment to read it. But when is really the perfect moment to read any book? I thought maybe, oh, next time I go to Spain, I'll read this book, but when is that likely to happen right now? So I cannot wait to get to For Whom the Bell Tolls. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Another book I'm really looking forward to is The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald. George MacDonald is an author I am very curious about, but I have never read any of his books. He writes both children and adult books, mostly fantasy. He is considered kind of the forefather to people like C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien. I think he was an influence on Tolkien and Lewis. And this book, The Princess and the Goblin, is a very old children's fantasy. I think it's Victorian as well, so another good pick for Victober. And yeah, I really don't know what it's about. I think it's about a little princess named Irene, and she goes in these caves and discovers these tunnels underneath her castle and finds all these little goblins. So I don't know what it's about, but I'm really looking forward to it. I love children's literature, and this is one of the oldest children's literature books in my collection, so I cannot wait to get to this one. George MacDonald also has a number of other books that are on my TBR, On the Back of the North Wind, Lilith, so I'm really hoping I like this one so I can go back and read some of his other books as well. Another book I would like to get to sooner rather than later is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I also mentioned this in my mid-year freakout tag as a book that I would like to get to soon. I still have not read it, so as we are recording and posting this video, I should be starting this book immediately because I have plans for this book. I have videos that I want to do about it in collaboration with other classic books, so I need to get to it. I even bought this really nice Word Cloud Classics edition to entice myself to read it, but one thing I will say as a warning to anyone thinking of getting this edition, it has some of the tiniest font I have ever seen in the classic book. So I probably should have just bought the Penguins edition of this, but I am looking forward to this and I've got to get to it soon. Question number 6 is a favorite modern book series that is based on a classic, and for me, I am going to go with a children's series that is kind of a classic in its own right, and that is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I absolutely love this series. I think it is so phenomenal. I think it is our generation's version of Narnia, of Lord of the Rings. It is certainly better writing than Harry Potter, so all you Harry Potter fans out there, do not hate me for saying that, but I really do think this is a better series than Harry Potter. It just has more depth to it, a lot more discussion that you can talk about with this book. I really think you could have a college level analysis of this book and this series. That's why I love it so much. It is based on Paradise Lost by John Milton, so what I considered a real classic, not just something like the Brontes or Austen, like a very old school classic, Paradise Lost, which I have not read yet. So because I love this series so much, I would at some point like to go back and read Paradise Lost because I love the themes in this book about original sin, about the transition from a child to an adult and what that entails. And it's also just a really great kid's story at the end of the day. I love the demons. I love how they are outside of the characters' bodies, so you can kind of have a conversation with yourself, basically. That would be so awesome. I wish I lived in a world with demons so I could talk to my own consciousness. That would be so fun. I love the characters in this. Obviously Lee Scoresby, one of my favorite. Yorick Burnison, one of my favorites as well. The parents are a trip. I love Mrs. Coulter and the father. And there are some really creepy characters in this as well. It has like some of the most sinister angels in this book. The angels scare the pants out of me every time they show up in this book. Absolutely love it. If you're looking to read His Dark Materials for the first time, I highly recommend reading it alongside the new HBO miniseries that has come out over the last couple of years. They've done the first one, The Golden Compass, and the second one, The Subtle Knife. And then I think they're going to come out with a third one this year, The Amber Spyglass. So I love that series. I love what they did with it, how they adapted it. It's just really fresh and original, but it does stay true to the books as well. So highly recommend that series. I think that last question leads in very well to question number 7, which is what is your favorite movie or TV series based on a classic? So again, His Dark Materials on HBO. I love it. Stars Ruth Wilson. It has Lin-Manuel Miranda, who doesn't love him. And the little girl who plays Lyra, she is just phenomenal in it. So is the boy that plays Will. Fantastic. In general, though, I do think the best adaptations of classics are the BBC miniseries based on classics. I do think that is the best way to adapt a classic and to dramatize a classic, because you have more time in a 4-part series to show the depth and the breadth of a lot of these classics than you do in maybe like a 2-hour Hollywood movie. So some of my favorites are definitely Jane Eyre with Ruth Wilson again and Toby Stephens. I also love North and South. Like, who does not love that one, right, ladies? Richard Armitage is so steamy in that one. I also really love Emma, of course, which I've mentioned before on this channel. Another favorite of mine, if you're looking to get into Anthony Trollope, is Dr. Thorne, which is produced and directed by Julian Fellowes of Downton Abbey fame. I really like that one because Julian Fellowes introduces each episode of that miniseries, and he talks all about the significance of Anthony Trollope and the time period that he lived in. And it's just a great one to watch if you are trying to get an understanding of Trollope's sense of humor. I love that one so much. Question number 8 is worst classic movie adaptation or television series adaptation. For me, I'm going to go with one I've mentioned previously in my Jane Austen video, and that is Mansfield Park, the 90s movie. That is such a terrible movie. I cannot stand it. It is not faithful to Austen at all. Do not watch that movie. Another one I really do not like is Howard's End. It came out, I think, in the 90s, and it has so many great actors in it. It has Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson and Helena Bonham Carter and Vanessa Redgrave. So phenomenal actors in that movie, but it's just so boring. I don't think that it was faithful to Howard's End by E.M. Forster, which is one of my all-time favorite classics. So that happens sometimes. I mean, sometimes, like I said before, the books are so good and they just can't be adapted to television or the movies because the writing is so strong, and that's the best reason to read the book. But yeah. Another one that I really just did not care for was the Keira Knightley version of Anna Karenina. So as someone that now loves Anna Karenina, I just thought that that movie didn't do justice to the book. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the costumes were really pretty. I thought the staging and direction of it on the theater stage was really interesting. But that movie just speaks to the surface level of Anna Karenina, and it doesn't get into the depth of Anna Karenina, which is what Leo Tolstoy was talking about. So I would love to see Anna Karenina in more of a miniseries version, and a lot of the movies that are out there are just really dated, really old. So I wish they would come out with a new miniseries for Anna Karenina. Please, it would be so, so good. Question number 9 is favorite editions you would like to collect more books from. And as a book collector, this is probably my favorite question. I could do a video all about this question, and I probably will. If you have been watching my videos at all, you know that my favorite editions are by far the folio editions of classics. And so again, Folio is a publisher that has been around for about 70 years, since the 1940s, and they publish these naked hardback cloth-bound editions of our favorite classic books. They also feature really beautiful illustrations. So here I have To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. So just the covers of them, the cloth covering, so stunning. They have sewn bindings. So this one is quite old. It's from the 80s. So I've really been enjoying collecting a lot of these secondhand on eBay and eBooks, especially by female authors, like I said, from the early 1900s. And so this version of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf is from the 1980s. It's got beautiful illustrations in it throughout as well, if I can find a few to show you. So yeah, that's why I love the folio editions. Not only are they just a pleasure to collect, but they are really wonderful to read as well. The reading experience is just on a whole nother level. So I do think if you have a favorite classic, go back and try to get in a folio edition. You will not regret it. Another favorite series to collect are these Reader's Digest versions of classics. These were a book club that came out in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and they were all classic books. And they're most noticeable by their cloth naked hardbacks, and then they have this like leather spine, so they look really nice all lined up on your shelf together. Then they have usually this little insert that comes with them, just kind of explaining the time period and the author's life and the context of the book. They also have really beautiful illustrations peppered throughout. So as someone that loves illustrations in classic books, I think these are really nice ones to collect. So here is Call of the Wild, of course. So very beautiful. And they have ribbon bookmarks, and the text is quite large and very easy to read. So just a pleasure to read these ones as well. I think the booktuber that did the best video about the Reader's Digest versions would be A Book Olive. She did a really nice video a few years ago just explaining her collection, and so I will link that below if you're curious about Reader's Digest versions. My other favorite editions to collect are these Barnes & Noble classics from Barnes & Noble. I have been collecting these for years, since I was in high school, and they haven't really changed since that time. So in the last 10-15 years, they haven't changed at all. And so when they are lined up on the shelf together, they look really nice. I also like that they have these kind of soft pastel colors. So again, when they're on the shelf together, they create this nice rainbow effect. And they have really nice supplemental reading material. Maybe not as good as something like the Penguin Black editions. I think Penguin probably has a little bit better supplemental reading material, so if you need them for school, maybe go with the Penguins. But these Barnes & Noble ones, they do the job as well. They usually have like very nice timelines about the author's life. They have suggestions for further reading, great introductions, great afterwards, and then my favorite are these comments and questions sections in the back, and they are just reviews by other authors that lived in the time period that the books were written in. So it's really fun to see what other famous authors thought about your favorite classics. And I guess the real reason I love these Barnes & Noble editions is the font is really nice and readable. So I've never had a hard time reading a Barnes & Noble edition. A lot of my favorite books I read in the Barnes & Noble edition, and I think the font was a major reason that I got through them so easily. So if you're one where font like really is important to you, I recommend these ones. Another series which I really enjoy collecting are these Puffin Classics children's editions, and these are really nice if you're trying to start a classics collection for either children or yourself. A lot of famous books come in this edition, and they're very inexpensive. I think around $6 or $7, so very easy to start collecting. And I see them everywhere, especially independent bookstores. I see them a lot in the children's department of independent bookstores, so very easy to find. I also like the size and shape of these books. They are almost square. So here's what they look like next to the Barnes & Noble editions. They're kind of squat and square and so cute. They also feature really unique and colorful cover art as well. So if you're a person like me that just likes aesthetically pleasing books, these ones are a lot of bang for your buck. They're really fun to Instagram as well on the cheap. I really enjoy these ones, and a lot of people are leery of the Puffin Classics because they think that they are abridged children's versions, and that is simply not true. Most of them are complete and unabridged, and one way that you can tell is on the back by the barcode. It'll say complete and unabridged in yellow. And I think I only own one Swiss Family Robinson that is abridged, but the rest of them are complete and unabridged. So I just want to put that out there in case you were curious. And finally, question number 10 is an underhyped classic that you would like to recommend to everyone. And for me, there is only one answer to that question as well, and that is The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orczy. I absolutely love this book, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. And I'm still surprised by how few people on booktube or bookstagram talk about this book, because it's absolutely phenomenal. It's one of my favorite classics, and it's so accessible. So it's one I really like to recommend to younger readers, especially kids that are in high school. If you need to read a book over summer break and you have to do a book report on it and you don't want it to be so boring, like watching paint dry, then read this book, because it's far from become boring. It has swashbuckling and adventure. It has romance, a great sense of humor, and it is also very historical. It's about the French Revolution. So the Scarlet Pimpernel is this gentleman that dresses up in costume and disguises himself, and he risks his own life to help other aristocrats that didn't do anything wrong escape Paris, escape France during the Reign of Terror, and he transports them back to England with him. So it's a lot of fun to read. My favorite thing about this book is that you as the reader are the omniscient reader. You know right from the beginning who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, but all the other characters in the book do not know who he is. So that is half the fun of the story, is just watching all of the other characters try and figure it out. And for all of you Batman fans out there, Batman is loosely based off the Scarlet Pimpernel. That whole like gentleman by day, superhero by night thing can trace its roots directly to this book. So if there's any DC Marvel fans out there, I really do think that you would like the Scarlet Pimpernel. It is the best. Thank you everyone for joining me for my classics book tag. And as you can see, I simply adore classics. They are some of my favorite books to read. And I really do not consider classics a separate genre like YA or fantasy or romance. I think the reason I love classics is because these are the best books that you can possibly read. They are books that generations of people have universally agreed upon as being the best books, and they come from a variety of genres, as you can see. They're also books that people are still talking about, that are still relevant in today's world, and for me that's always a good sign of a classic like Anna Karenina. If it's still relevant today and it's still teaching people today, then it's a good book, and that's why I love reading classics. So thank you everyone, and have a great day.